Hey, amazing viewers! Before we go into this riveting narrative, drop your location in the comments below. We love connecting with you all around the world. Also, if this is your first time here, press the subscribe button and join our incredible journey. Let's hit 10,000 subscribers this month together. Your support means everything. The appointment. The next day, I offered to accompany Martha and Amelia to the doctor's office. I could tell Amelia was nervous. She clung to Martha's hand, her small frame trembling slightly as we entered the clinic. Dr. Whittaker, a kind and patient man who had been our town's doctor for decades, greeted us with his usual reassuring smile. As the examination began, I stepped out to give them privacy. I waited anxiously in the lobby, my heart pounding. Minutes felt like hours, and when Martha finally emerged, her face was pale. Dr. Whittaker wants to run some tests, she said, her voice shaky. He says there's something unusual, but he's not sure what. Amelia followed her, her face pale but calm. She looked at me with those same wide, knowing eyes and gave me a small, sad smile. "I'll be okay, Miss Caroline," she said softly, though her voice lacked conviction. The waiting game. The days that followed were some of the longest of my life. The town buzzed with speculation, but no one outside our small circle knew the truth. Martha confided in me more than once, expressing her fears and frustrations. She was terrified that whatever was happening to Amelia was beyond her ability to fix. "I don't know what I'll do if it's serious," she admitted one evening as we sat on her porch, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. "She's all I have." "She's strong," I reassured her. "And so are you. Whatever this is, we'll face it together." When the test results finally came in, Dr. Whittaker called Martha with an urgency that sent chills down her spine. "You need to bring Amelia back immediately," he said, his tone grave. "We'd found something, and we need to talk." Martha and I exchanged a worried glance, but Amelia, sitting quietly at the kitchen table, simply nodded. "Let's go," she said, her voice steady in a way that belied her age. As I accompanied them to the clinic once again, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were on the brink of discovering something life-changing, not just for Amelia, but for everyone who loved her. And little did I know, that revelation would challenge everything we thought we knew about strength, resilience, and the power of love. The revelation that shook us all. The small clinic was unusually quiet when we arrived, as though the walls themselves knew the weight of what was about to be revealed. Amelia clung tightly to Martha's hand, her small fingers trembling ever so slightly. I walked just behind them, my heart pounding in my chest. Whatever Dr. Whittaker had discovered, it was big enough to rattle even his calm, professional demeanor. When we were ushered into his office, I saw it in his eyes. A mix of concern, urgency, and something else I couldn't quite place. He gestured for us to sit, and Martha lowered herself into the chair beside Amelia, who remained unusually still. "Dr. Whittaker," Martha began, her voice breaking slightly. "Please, tell us, what's wrong with Amelia?" The doctor leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk. "Martha, I won't sugarcoat this. What we found is highly unusual. The swelling in Amelia's abdomen is not caused by a typical illness. It's not an infection, and it's not dietary." Martha's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with fear. "Then what is it?" she whispered. Dr. Whittaker hesitated, glancing at Amelia before continuing. "There's a mass in her abdomen. We initially thought it was a tumor, but further tests show that it's not malignant. It's an undeveloped twin." The words hung in the air, heavy and surreal. For a moment, none of us spoke, the weight of his revelation sinking in like a stone dropped into still water. "An undeveloped twin," I finally managed to ask, breaking the silence. "What does that mean?" Dr. Whittaker sighed, folding his hands together. "It's a rare phenomenon called fetus in fetu. It occurs when, during early stages of development in the womb, one twin is absorbed into the other. The absorbed twin becomes trapped within the body of the surviving sibling. In most cases, it's never discovered because it doesn't grow or cause problems. But in Amelia's case, the tissue has grown and is now causing the swelling and discomfort. Martha looked like she might faint. Her grip on Amelia tightened, and her voice trembled as she asked, "Is it dangerous? Can it be removed?" Dr. Whittaker nodded. "Yes, it can be removed. But the surgery is complex, and given Amelia's age and size, it carries risks. We'll need to bring in specialists from the city." Amelia, who had been silent the entire time, finally spoke. Her voice was small but steady, cutting through the tension in the room. "So there's another baby inside me." Dr. Whittaker softened his tone, crouching slightly to meet her eyes. "Not a baby, sweetheart. It's not alive. It's just tissue, like hair, bone, and sometimes even teeth. It's a part of you, but it's not something that can grow into a person." Amelia nodded slowly, her face thoughtful in a way that seemed far too mature for her 9 years. "Okay," she said simply, as if she understood the gravity of it better than anyone else in the room. The weight of a decision. The drive home was quiet. Martha held Amelia close in the back seat, her arms wrapped protectively around her granddaughter. I offered to drive, sensing that Martha's mind was too preoccupied to focus on the road. The stillness in the car was punctuated only by Amelia's soft breaths and the faint hum of the engine. When we reached the house, Martha hesitated before getting out. "Caroline," she said softly, her voice barely audible over the crunch of gravel underfoot. "What if something goes wrong? What if I lose her?" I placed a hand on her shoulder, my own heart heavy with the enormity of what she was facing. "Martha, I know you're scared, but Amelia is strong. She's a fighter, and so are you. We'll get through this, together." Inside, Amelia seemed to retreat into herself. She sat on the living room couch, clutching her favorite stuffed bear, her gaze distant. It broke my heart to see her like that, but I knew she needed time to process. So I stayed with Martha in the kitchen, helping her prepare a pot of tea while we talked about the next steps. "We need to schedule the surgery as soon as possible," Martha said, her hands trembling as she poured boiling water into the teapot. "But I don't know how I'll pay for it. The specialists, the hospital bills. It's going to be more than I can afford." "We'll figure it out," I assured her. "The town loves you and Amelia. People will help, and I'll be here every step of the way." A community rallies. True to my word, I began spreading the word about Amelia's condition, carefully, to avoid fueling the town's ever-present rumor mill. To my surprise, the response was immediate and overwhelming. Neighbors, friends, and even strangers came forward, offering donations, organizing bake sales, and setting up a fundraiser at the town hall. Within days, we had raised enough to cover the initial costs. But it wasn't just the money that moved me. It was the way people rallied around Amelia. They brought her cards, small gifts, and words of encouragement. Her schoolmates made a giant banner that read, "We love you, Amelia," and hung it outside her window. For the first time in weeks, I saw her smile. Martha, too, seemed to draw strength from the community's support. She became more resolute, determined to face whatever challenges lay ahead. "We're not alone," she said one evening as we sat on the porch, watching the sunset. "And for that, I'll always be grateful." Preparing for the unknown. As the surgery date approached, Amelia grew quieter, but no less brave. She spent her days drawing pictures and writing in a little notebook she kept close to her. When I asked her what she was writing, she simply said, "My thoughts." On the eve of the surgery, I found her sitting by the window, staring out at the stars. "What are you thinking about, sweetheart?" I asked, sitting beside her. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with a wisdom far beyond her years. "Miss Caroline," she said softly, "do you think this happened for a reason?" Her question took me by surprise, and for a moment, I didn't know how to answer. "Maybe," I said finally. "Sometimes things happen that we don't understand. But I do know one thing. You're one of the bravest people I've ever met." She smiled at that, a small but genuine smile. "I'm not scared," she said. "I just want to be okay again." "You will be," I promised, though my own heart ached with worry. "You will be." As I tucked her into bed that night, I couldn't help but marvel at her resilience. Amelia was only 9 years old, yet she carried herself with a strength that inspired everyone around her. The next morning, as we prepared to leave for the hospital, Amelia turned to me and Martha, her face calm but determined. "I'm ready," she said. And as we drove toward the unknown, I realized that Amelia wasn't just ready for the surgery. She was ready to show us all what it meant to face life's challenges with courage, grace, and hope. A fight for hope. The morning of Amelia's surgery was both eerie and electric, a blend of quiet anticipation and restless energy. The house had been bustling with activity in the early hours, with Martha nervously double-checking every detail, packing overnight bags, ensuring Amelia's favorite bear was safely tucked inside, and triple confirming the appointment time. Yet, despite the chaos, there was an unmistakable stillness in the air, as if even the walls were holding their breath for what was to come. Amelia, in her usual calm demeanor, seemed almost detached from the anxiety that enveloped the rest of us. She sat cross-legged on the couch, sketching something in her notebook. Her thin fingers moved the pencil in slow, deliberate strokes. She was creating a picture of a large tree with its roots spreading deep into the ground, surrounded by tiny figures that seemed to represent people. "What are you drawing, sweetheart?" I asked gently, crouching beside her. She didn't look up. "A strong tree," she said. "Grandma says trees stay strong even in storms because their roots go deep. I want to be like that." I smiled, swallowing the lump that had formed in my throat. "You already are, Amelia." The journey to the hospital. The drive to the city hospital felt like an eternity. The highway stretched endlessly, lined with trees that blurred together as the car sped forward. Martha was unusually quiet, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Amelia sat in the back seat, humming softly to herself, her bear clutched in one hand and her sketchbook in the other. I sat beside her, trying to offer comfort through my presence alone. But truthfully, I felt as helpless as Martha. It wasn't just the surgery that scared me, it was the uncertainty. The idea of placing Amelia's fragile, 9-year-old body into the hands of surgeons and hoping for the best felt like an unbearable leap of faith. When we finally arrived at the hospital, the stark, sterile building loomed before us, its glass facade reflecting the pale morning sun. Nurses greeted us with kind smiles, their voices gentle as they led us through the labyrinth of hallways to the pediatric wing. Amelia's room was small but cozy, decorated with colorful murals of animals and balloons. She climbed onto the bed without hesitation, her bear tucked under one arm. The surgeons speak. It wasn't long before Dr. Whitaker arrived, accompanied by a specialist named Dr. Harper, a tall woman with a calm, confident presence. They explained the procedure in detail, their voices steady but serious. "The surgery will take several hours," Dr. Harper explained. "The mass is located near some delicate organs, so we'll need to proceed with extreme care. But Amelia is young and healthy otherwise, which works in her favor." Martha nodded, her face pale but resolute. "Please, just bring her back to me." Dr. Whitaker placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We will. Amelia is in the best hands." The nurses began preparing Amelia, gently attaching monitors to her chest and placing an IV line in her tiny arm. She winced but didn't cry, her gaze focused on the ceiling. When it was time for her to be taken to the operating room, Martha bent down and kissed her forehead, her voice breaking as she whispered, "Be brave, my love. I'll be waiting for you." Amelia smiled up at her. "I'm not scared, Grandma. I'll be okay." And with that, she was wheeled away, leaving us to wait in a silence that felt impossibly heavy. The waiting room. The hours that followed were some of the longest of my life. Martha and I sat in the small, brightly lit waiting room, the cheerful colors doing little to ease the tension in the air. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second dragging on like an eternity. Martha was a bundle of nerves, her hands twisting a handkerchief as she muttered prayers under her breath. "Please, let her be okay. Let her come back to me," she whispered over and over again. I didn't have the heart to tell her to stop. It was her way of coping. And frankly, I felt like joining her. I tried to distract myself by flipping through magazines, but nothing held my attention. My mind kept drifting back to Amelia, imagining her tiny body surrounded by machines, the surgeons working with precise hands to remove something that should never have been there in the first place. Occasionally, a nurse would come by with an update. "She's doing well," they would say, their smiles reassuring. "The surgeons are making good progress." But each update was followed by more waiting, more restless pacing, more silent prayers. The turning point. 3 hours into the surgery, Dr. Harper emerged from the operating room, her face calm but serious. Martha and I shot to our feet, our hearts pounding. "The surgery is going well so far," she said, her tone measured. "We've successfully isolated the mass and are in the process of removing it. But I need to warn you, it's larger and more complex than we initially thought. There's some tissue entanglement near her intestines that's making it tricky." Martha's face turned ashen. "What does that mean? Is she in danger?" Dr. Harper placed a hand on her arm. "We're being extremely careful. So far, there's no indication of any permanent damage, but it's going to take longer than expected. I just wanted to keep you informed." Martha nodded numbly, her hands trembling as she clutched her handkerchief. "Thank you, doctor. Please, don't let anything happen to her." Dr. Harper gave a small, reassuring smile before disappearing back into the operating room, a glimmer of hope. As the hours dragged on, the waiting room began to fill with a few familiar faces. Neighbors from the town had come to show their support, bringing coffee, snacks, and words of encouragement. It was a small gesture, but it meant the world to Martha and me. Knowing that so many people cared about Amelia was a reminder that we weren't alone in this. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Dr. Harper and Dr. Whittaker reappeared. This time, their smiles were wider, their postures more relaxed. "The surgery is complete," Dr. Harper announced. "We successfully removed the mass. Amelia is stable and in recovery." The relief that washed over me was almost overwhelming. Martha burst into tears, her hands covering her face as she sobbed with a mixture of gratitude and exhaustion. I hugged her tightly, my own tears spilling over as the tension that had gripped me for hours finally released. "She's going to be okay?" I asked, my voice shaking. Dr. Whittaker nodded. "She's strong, just like you said. It's going to take time for her to heal, but we're confident she'll make a full recovery." Seeing Amelia again. When we were finally allowed to see Amelia, the sight of her broke my heart and mended it all at once. She was so small, lying in the hospital bed with monitors beeping softly around her. Her face was pale, her breathing shallow, but her eyes fluttered open as we approached. "Grandma," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. Martha rushed to her side, taking her hand and kissing it gently. "I'm here, my darling. I'm here. You were so brave." Amelia smiled faintly. "Told you I'd be okay." I sat beside her, stroking her hair gently. "You were amazing, sweetheart. The strongest tree I've ever seen." She closed her eyes, a peaceful expression settling over her face. "I feel lighter," she murmured before drifting off to sleep. As I watched her sleep, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath, I realized that Amelia's strength wasn't just inspiring. It was transformative. She had faced something no child should ever have to endure, and she had done so with courage, grace, and an unshakable belief that she would come out the other side. And she did. The roots that held strong. Amelia's recovery wasn't swift, but it was steady, and that in itself felt like a miracle. Each day brought small victories. The first time she sat up on her own, the first time she asked for her favorite soup, the first time she laughed at one of my silly jokes. It was like watching a tiny flower bloom after a storm, fragile but full of life. The town had rallied around her in ways none of us could have imagined. Neighbors took turns delivering meals to Martha's house. Amelia's classmates organized a welcome home parade when she was discharged from the hospital, lining the street with handmade signs that read, "Welcome back, Amelia," and "Our strong tree." Amelia, sitting in the front seat of Martha's car, waved shyly, her cheeks pink with embarrassment, but her eyes sparkling with gratitude. The event left Martha in tears. I didn't realize how much love there was in this town, she said to me that evening as we sat on her porch, sipping tea under the soft glow of the stars. They didn't just save her life. They reminded me that we're never alone. The sketchbook that spoke volumes. Amelia's sketchbook became a central part of her recovery. She filled its pages with drawings that reflected her journey. There were trees, their roots intertwining with one another, forming a network of support. There were stormy skies that gave way to rainbows. There was even a picture of the hospital bed, surrounded by figures she labeled as ankles, a nod to the doctors, nurses, and everyone who had cared for her. One day, as we sat together on the porch, I noticed her working on a new drawing. This one was different. It wasn't a scene or a tree. It was a large heart, filled with smaller hearts of different colors, each labeled with a name. "What's this one about?" I asked, intrigued. Amelia smiled, her pencil pausing mid-stroke. "It's my thank you heart," she explained. "It's for everyone who helped me. You, Grandma, Dr. Whittaker, the people from the town. I wanted to show how all our hearts are connected." I blinked back tears, overwhelmed by the simplicity and beauty of her idea. "That's lovely, Amelia. It's perfect." A lesson for the town. Amelia's story didn't just transform her and Martha. It transformed the entire town. Her resilience, her bravery, and her gratitude reminded everyone of the power of community and the strength that comes from supporting one another. The fundraiser that had started to cover her medical bills turned into something much bigger. The town created a fund to help families facing medical emergencies, ensuring that no one would have to go through what Martha had gone through alone. They called it Amelia's Roots, a tribute to the little girl who had shown them what it meant to weather a storm. Amelia, despite her young age, became a symbol of hope. People would often stop her in the street to tell her how her story had inspired them. She would blush and mumble a soft "thank you," still a little shy but always gracious. The day she found her voice. A year after her surgery, the town invited Amelia to speak at a community event. Martha and I weren't sure if she would want to, but to our surprise, she agreed. The event was held in the town square, under the shade of a giant oak tree that had stood there for generations. Amelia, now healthier and stronger, stood on a small platform, her sketchbook in hand. The crowd fell silent as she began to speak. "When I was sick," she began, her voice clear and steady, "I felt really scared. But then I realized I wasn't alone. My grandma, Miss Caroline, and so many people helped me. You all became my roots." She opened her sketchbook, showing the crowd her thank you heart. "This is for all of you," she said, "because we're all connected. And when we stick together, we can get through anything." The crowd erupted into applause, tears glistening in many eyes. I saw Martha wiping her cheeks, her face filled with pride. For me, it was a moment I would never forget. A moment that proved how much one small, brave soul could impact the world around her. The strongest tree. Amelia's life returned to a new kind of normal after that day. She went back to school, played with her friends, and continued to fill her sketchbook with drawings that reflected her ever-growing imagination. But she never forgot the journey she had been through, or the people who had walked it with her. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the town in hues of gold and amber, Amelia came to visit me. She carried a small pot with a sapling inside. A young tree, its roots barely visible in the rich soil. "I wanted to give this to you, Miss Caroline," she said, placing it in my hands. "It's a thank you tree, so you can always remember how strong you helped me be." I felt my heart swell as I hugged her tightly. "Thank you, Amelia. I'll take good care of it." We planted the sapling in my garden that evening, right next to the porch where we had spent so many afternoons talking and drawing. Over the years, that tree grew tall and strong, its branches spreading wide, just like Amelia's roots had spread through the hearts of everyone who knew her. The legacy of Amelia's roots. Amelia grew up to be an artist, her drawings evolving into breathtaking works that told stories of hope, resilience, and connection. Her first gallery featured the original Thank You Heart sketch, now framed and admired by people from all walks of life. She became known not just for her art, but for her ability to inspire others through her story. Martha, now older but still sharp, lived to see her granddaughter blossom into the remarkable young woman she had always believed she would be. And as for me, I kept that tree in my garden as a reminder of the little girl who had taught me more about strength and love than I ever thought possible. Amelia's journey wasn't just a story of survival, it was a story of growth, connection, and the unshakable bonds that hold us together. And every time the wind rustled through the branches of her thank you tree, it carried a whisper of that lesson. No matter the storm, the strongest trees are those with the deepest roots. This concludes the story. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope you found it enjoyable. If you did, please consider liking the video and sharing it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and activate the notification bell for more captivating stories. Have a great day.